Welcome back. President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been indicted on 3 federal gun charges. He is now facing up to 25 years in prison. His attorney spoke out yesterday. Watch.
This office has never brought a charge like this against anybody. Therefore, you have to ask what changed. It is the folks like Chairman Comer and the Republican MAGA crazies who have been pressuring this U.S. attorney to do something to vindicate their political position. And guess what? They succeeded.
Meanwhile, many people are slamming the indictment, including former President Trump. He says on Truth Social the gun charge is the only crime that Hunter Biden committed that does not implicate Crooked Joe Biden. 1 down, 11 to go, writes the former president. So sad. Joining me right now is the New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor Miranda Devine, and Harvard Law professor emeritus and the author of Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law, Alan Dershowitz. Great to see you both. Thank you for being here. Alan, I want to kick it off with you. You're predicting this case will not even come to trial. Tell us how you see it.
That's right. This was a tactic. I predicted the indictment would occur. There was pressure on him to have the indictment. This case will be resolved by a plea. The plea will be a very complicated one. It's called a stipulated plea. I think what's going to happen is he won't contest the facts, but he'll say the Second Amendment protects him, and also double jeopardy because there was a deal that was agreed to by both parties. So I don't think we're going to have a full-blown trial, and I think the result will be a probationary sentence. And that is the typical sentence for a crime like this. The big issue is whether or not there will be further investigations of Burisma, of the alleged meetings that occurred, breakfasts, etc., and things that do implicate the president. That's why the deal fell apart last time, and we still don't know whether this ends the prosecution of Hunter Biden or just is the first step that will result in a tax charge and perhaps a FOIA charge as well.
Yeah, Miranda, we've just been through all of this news about Hunter Biden not paying taxes and, of course, all of the crimes that the House Republicans told us about that they have unearthed. What's your reaction to this?
Well, look, I mean, David Weiss successfully allowed the statute of limitations to run out on the most serious tax evasion charges. And so they're left with not much unless the prosecutors are really aggressive. And interestingly enough, the prosecutor now, Leo Weiss, has been brought in and replaced the previous team, particularly Leslie Wolf, who was exposed by the IRS whistleblowers, Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, as being not impartial, but in fact being rather friendly towards Hunter Biden's lawyers, tipping them off when there were going to be searches, as well as we had FBI headquarters tipping off the Joe Biden transition team and Hunter Biden that the IRS and the FBI were outside his door wanting to interview him. And, of course, they never managed to do that back in December of 2020. So there's been a very bizarre situation where the Hunter Bidens and his lawyers and the prosecution team under David Weiss in Delaware have been working on the same team. And that's what the IRS whistleblowers were blowing the whistle on. And now it seems, though, that there's a new prosecution team in town, led by this sort of killer called Leo Weiss, who's got a lot of pretty aggressive convictions under his belt, and seems that they're just playing it by the book. So, as Alan just said, there may be more indictments coming down the pike. I know that Hunter Biden's lawyers are not happy at all at the moment.
Well, I mean, look, I'm just wondering, Alan, if this is an opportunity for the DOJ to make it look like it's, it's impartial. We've had 4 indictments against Donald Trump, some of which are quite questionable. And a lot of people have said that's, political persecution, and this is all politics. Donald Trump keeps rising in the ratings in terms of the polls, and yet, this indictment doesn't even mention what the House Oversight Committee has been working on, and that's all of those business transactions, 20 shell companies, which received $20 million from countries like China, Romania, Ukraine. So your thoughts on that?
Well, if I were Joe Biden, I would be the one demanding the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate Burisma, all these allegations. There's so much smoke here that if he's innocent, he ought to be demanding an investigation to clear him. An investigation not by an insider like Weiss, but by a very distinguished former judge, somebody who's outside of politics, who can look into the entire relationship between Hunter Biden and his father and between Hunter Biden's foreign connections and really either clear the air or result in a report or perhaps even indictments. But right now, we the American people aren't satisfied with partisan investigations, whether the partisan investigations be done by Republican congressional committees or by a Democrat Justice Department. We need a special counsel to look into these very serious charges that may turn out not to be true. But if they are true, they could rise to the level of impeachable offenses if they occurred during the presidency of Joe Biden, or if indictment or if impeachment is permitted for conduct that occurred while he was vice president. That's a legal issue that's very uncertain. But we're not on the right track now. We're not on the track to getting the truth.
Well, Miranda, I mean, we don't know what China and Ukraine and Romania has on Joe Biden, but, you know, the House Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee have been very clear. This investigation is about Joe Biden, not just Hunter Biden. He's a side actor. You've got your latest article in the New York Post this morning detailing something we discussed yesterday, and that is this breakfast meeting with then Vice President Joe Biden that he had with a Kazakhstani bank official in 2015. At the official Naval Observatory residence. Hunter and his business partner, Devine Archer, were also there. Of course, the chairman of the bank lobbying for Joe Biden to back the Kazakhstani prime minister at the time to become the Secretary General of the United Nations. It happened at the same time Hunter and Archer were working on an energy project for Burisma in Kazakhstan, Miranda. I mean, who gets a meeting at that vice presidential residence for all those people? Tell us about your piece.
Well, you've summarised it really well, Maria, and it's a perfect example and just one of many of the access that Hunter Biden's business partners or his benefactors, his future benefactors, people that he was hoping to extract lots of money from overseas, got with Joe Biden. Joe Biden invited not just the Kazakhstani representative lobbying him to breakfast at the Naval Observatory when he was vice president. He invited a lot of other of Hunter Biden's overseas business partners from Mexico and elsewhere. He also went to dinner twice at Cafe Milano in Georgetown with Hunter Biden's business partners from Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine. He met at least a dozen, and he had 20 plus speakerphone calls with the business partners.
Well, he said he knew nothing about any of this, so maybe he just went in there and didn't focus on what he was doing, because that's what he said. Miranda, Devine, Alan Dershowitz, thank you so much. We're going to keep a spotlight on it, and we'll be right back.